The Blank Slate, by Steven Pinker. Introduction. What if I told you that one of the kindest, most hopeful ideas of the last century might also be one of the most dangerous? It's an idea you've heard 1,000 times, in 1,000 different ways. It's the whisper in the back of our minds that tells us we can be anything, that we are born as empty canvases, waiting for the world to paint its masterpiece upon us. The idea that our parents, our teachers, our society, they hold the brush. It's the belief that human nature isn't a fixed thing, but something we can shape, mold, and perfect. If we just create the right society, the right schools, the right families, we can engineer a better human being, free from selfishness, violence, and prejudice. This idea is known as the blank slate. For decades, it was more than a theory, it was the official doctrine of the modern world. To challenge it wasn't just to be wrong, it was to be a bad person. It was to be a bigot, a fatalist, someone who wanted to justify oppression and slam the door on human progress. But in 2002, a brilliant and fearless cognitive scientist named Steven Pinker published a book that took a sledgehammer to that sacred idea. That book, The Blank Slate, The Modern Denial of Human Nature, was an intellectual earthquake. It sold hundreds of thousands of copies, was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, and ignited a firestorm of debate that still burns today. Pinker, a professor at Harvard and one of the world's most respected thinkers on language and the mind, argued that modern science, from genetics to neuroscience to evolutionary psychology, was proving, beyond any reasonable doubt, that the blank slate was a myth. He wasn't just saying we're born with a few reflexes. He was saying we are born with a rich, complex, and universal human nature. A nature full of instincts, talents, and tendencies that shape our lives in profound ways. And he argued that denying this nature wasn't just bad science, it was a disaster for our values, our politics, and our understanding of ourselves. This journey we're about to take is not for the faint of heart. It will challenge things you may have been taught your entire life. But here is my promise to you. By the end of our time together, you will understand the three powerful and flawed ideas that have secretly governed our world. You will see the stunning scientific discoveries that are rewriting our story. And you will realize that accepting our true human nature doesn't make us puppets on a string. It doesn't crush our hopes for a better world. In fact, it might be the only thing that can truly set us free. Let's begin. Book summary. To understand the revolution that Steven Pinker started, we first have to understand the empire he was rebelling against. For most of the 20th century, intellectual life was ruled by what Pinker calls a holy trinity of ideas about human nature. These ideas became the default, the respectable, the only way to think about ourselves. The first, and most powerful, is the one we've already met, the blank slate. This idea comes to us from the philosopher John Locke, who imagined the mind as a piece of white paper, void of all characters. Nothing is written on it at birth. Everything we are, our intelligence, our personality, our desires, is inscribed by experience. Society is the writer. Your parents, your culture, your education, they create you. You can see why this was so attractive. If we are all born as identical blank slates, then any differences we see between people, between men and women, between races, between the rich and the poor, must be the result of their different experiences. It means prejudice isn't just wrong, it's factually baseless. It means we can perfect humanity. If we can just fix our schools, eliminate poverty, and raise our children better, we can create a new, better kind of person. The second idea in this trinity is the noble savage. This one comes from the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He believed that humans in their natural state are peaceful, selfless, and happy. It is civilization, with its private property, its governments, and its social classes, that corrupts us, making us greedy, anxious, and violent. If this is true, it means that our problems are not inherent to us. Evil is not a part of our nature. It's a stain that society puts on us. To create a better world, all we need to do is tear down the corrupt institutions that hold us back. If we could just get back to our natural state, we'd find paradise. And the third idea is the ghost in the machine. This phrase, coined by the philosopher Gilbert Ryle, describes the idea championed by René Descartes that the mind is something separate from the body. Your body is a physical machine, like a clock. But you, your conscious self, your soul, are a ghost inhabiting that machine. This ghost is free. It's not bound by the physical laws of cause and effect. It can choose to do whatever it wants. This idea is deeply comforting. It means we have free will. It means we're responsible for our choices. It means there's something more to us than just biology, something that can survive even when the machine of the body breaks down. Together, these three ideas, the blank slate, the noble savage, and the ghost in the machine, formed the official theory of human nature for over a century. They became a kind of secular religion for modern intellectuals. To deny them was heresy. But then, science started finding cracks in the foundation. And this is where Steven Pinker enters our story. He argues that 4 new sciences have come together to build a completely new, and far more realistic, picture of human nature. He calls them the 4 bridges from the biological world to the mental world. The first bridge is cognitive science, the science of the mind. For a long time, the mind was a complete mystery. The behaviorists, like B.F. Skinner, just gave up and said we should only study observable behavior. But starting in the 1950s, the cognitive revolution gave us a powerful new way to think about the mind. It said the mind is a kind of computer. Now, this doesn't mean your brain is a Dell laptop. It means that what the mind does can be understood as a form of information processing. Beliefs are like data stored in the brain's memory. Thinking is like running a program that transforms that data. And our goals, what we want, are like feedback loops, constantly comparing where we are to where we want to be and guiding our actions to close the gap. This one idea, that mental life is a form of computation, was revolutionary. Why? Because it exorcised the ghost in the machine. It showed how something as non-physical as a reason or an intention could have real, physical effects in the world. It showed how a purely physical system, the brain, could be intelligent. A machine can be rational. A machine can be creative. Suddenly, we didn't need a ghost to explain our minds. But cognitive science did more than get rid of the ghost. It also destroyed the blank slate. As Pinker puts it, blank slates don't do anything. An empty piece of paper just sits there. For learning to happen, there has to be something there in the first place. Something to notice patterns, to connect ideas, to have goals. Leibniz, another great philosopher, said it best in his reply to Locke, "There is nothing in the intellect that was not first in the senses, except the intellect itself." You need innate machinery to do the learning. This is the death blow to the pure blank slate. You need programs that are pre-installed at birth. Programs for seeing in 3 dimensions, for learning a language, for understanding that other people have minds. Culture doesn't write on a blank slate, it works with a slate that is already intricately engraved. The second bridge is neuroscience, the science of the brain. If the mind is what the brain does, then every thought, every feeling, every choice is a physical event happening in the tissue of your brain. This is what Francis Crick called the astonishing hypothesis, and it is astonishing. When a surgeon stimulates a part of your brain with an electrode, you can have a vivid, lifelike experience. When chemicals seep into your brain, they can change your entire personality. When a piece of brain tissue dies, a piece of your mind can disappear with it. You might lose the ability to recognize faces, or the ability to feel empathy, or even the awareness of one side of your own body. This tells us that Descartes was wrong. The mind is not indivisible. It has parts, and those parts are physical. Neuroscience has also shown us that the self, the I that feels like it's in charge, is another one of the brain's clever illusions. Work with split brain patients, whose two brain hemispheres have been surgically separated, shows that we can literally have two independent consciousnesses in one skull, each making its own choices. And even more strangely, the left hemisphere, the one that controls language, is constantly making up stories to explain the behavior of the right hemisphere, without having a clue what it's really doing. Your conscious mind, Pinker suggests, is not the president in the Oval Office. It's the press secretary, constantly spinning a story to make you look good. And this brain, this intricate machine, is not a formless lump of putty at birth. The basic architecture of the brain, its lobes, its nuclei, its major pathways, is laid out by our genes before we're even born. This innate structure is not just a general blueprint, it shapes our abilities and temperaments. Studies have shown that the amount of gray matter in your frontal lobes, which is influenced by your genes, correlates with your intelligence. The brain of Albert Einstein was found to have unusually shaped regions involved in spatial and mathematical reasoning. These are not things that are sculpted by experience. They are part of our biological inheritance. The third bridge is behavioral genetics, the study of how our genes affect our behavior. This is probably the most controversial of the four sciences, and the one that people fear the most. But the findings, Pinker argues, are undeniable. And they're summarized in what the psychologist Eric Turkheimer calls the 3 laws of behavioral genetics. The first law: all human behavioral traits are heritable. What does this mean? It doesn't mean that your destiny is written in your DNA. Heritable is a technical term. It means that a portion of the differences between people in a given population can be traced back to differences in their genes. How do we know this? The evidence comes from classic studies of twins and adoptees. Identical twins, who share 100% of their genes, are remarkably similar to each other, even when they are raised in different families from birth. They are more similar than fraternal twins, who share only 50% of their genes. And biological siblings are far more similar than adoptive siblings, who grow up in the same house but share no genes. The conclusion is inescapable. From your IQ, to the 5 major dimensions of your personality: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, to things as specific as how religious you are or how likely you are to get divorced, about half of the variation is linked to your genes. This single fact demolishes a century of parenting advice. Any study that finds a correlation between how parents act and how their children turn out is basically worthless unless it controls for their shared genes. Do talkative parents have talkative children because they talk to them a lot? Or is it because the same genes that make the parents talkative were passed on to the children? Without looking at adoptees, you can't know. But this is where the second law comes in, and it's even more shocking. The second law: the effect of being raised in the same family is smaller than the effect of the genes. Think about that for a moment. All the things that parenting experts tell you to obsess over, the stimulating toys, the quality time, the parenting style, whether you're authoritative or permissive, all these things that siblings share by growing up in the same home. They have little to no lasting effect on their intelligence or personality. How on earth can we know that? Because adult siblings who are raised in the same home are no more similar to each other than siblings who are raised in different homes. And adopted siblings, who are raised in the same home but share no genes, grow up to be no more similar than 2 random people plucked off the street. This is one of the most stunning discoveries in the history of psychology. It doesn't mean parents don't matter. Of course they do. They have a huge impact on their children's happiness, on their skills, and on the relationship they have with them. But they don't seem to have the power to mold their children's fundamental personalities. The home environment, what siblings share, is not the key. This leads us to the third law, and the deepest mystery of all. The third law: a substantial portion of the variation in complex human behavioral traits is not accounted for by the effects of genes or families. If genes account for about 50% of the variation, and the shared family environment accounts for close to 0%, that leaves about 50% of the variation unexplained. This is the unique or non-shared environment. It's everything that happens to one sibling that doesn't happen to the other. But what is it? This is the frontier of psychological research. It could be peer groups. The psychologist Judith Rich Harris, in her groundbreaking book The Nurture Assumption, argues that children are socialized not by their parents, but by their peers. They don't try to be like their parents, they try to be like the other kids. The language, the culture, the personality, they are all shaped in the crucible of the peer group. Or it could be just chance. The random events that happen during brain development in the womb. The cosmic ray that mutates a gene. The unique life experiences, the fall off the bike, the chance meeting, the inspiring teacher. These unique events could be what makes even identical twins, raised in the same house, two different people. Whatever this unique environment is, the three laws together tell a powerful story. We are not just products of our genes. But we are also not products of our family upbringing. We are a complex mix of genes, peers, and chance. The slate is anything but blank. And that brings us to the fourth and final bridge, evolutionary psychology. This is the science that asks why our minds are designed the way they are. It applies the logic of Darwin's theory of natural selection to the human mind. The mind, like the body, is not just a random collection of parts. It's a system of mental organs, each shaped by evolution to solve a problem that our ancestors faced in their environment. We have a language instinct. We have an intuitive physics to understand objects. We have an intuitive biology to understand living things. We have a number sense. And we have a suite of social emotions, like sympathy, gratitude, guilt, and anger, that allow us to navigate the complex social world of cooperation and conflict. Evolutionary psychology is the ultimate antidote to the noble savage. The natural world, as George Williams put it, is grossly immoral. Natural selection is a process of maximizing short-sighted selfishness. It has no foresight and no compassion. This doesn't mean that we are all ruthless egoists. It means that altruism and cooperation are special states of affairs that need an explanation. They don't just happen. And the explanation is that, under certain conditions, our genes can do better by building a brain that is sometimes unselfish. The two main ways this can happen are through nepotism, helping our genetic relatives, and reciprocity, trading favors with others. These two principles, Pinker argues, explain the deepest structure of our social lives, and also the deepest roots of our suffering. Every human relationship, from the love between a parent and child, to the bond between spouses, to the trust between friends, is a mix of shared interests and conflicting interests. A parent and child share 50% of their genes, but the child is 100% related to itself. This sets up a natural conflict over how much parental investment the child deserves. This is the evolutionary root of sibling rivalry and parent-offspring conflict. A husband and wife can have their genetic interests perfectly aligned in their children, but the ever-present possibility of infidelity creates a fundamental conflict. The logic of reproduction predicts that men, on average, will have a stronger desire for sexual variety, while women will be choosier. This difference, Pinker argues, is the source of endless friction between the sexes. Even friendship is a delicate dance. We are designed to cooperate, but we are also exquisitely designed to detect cheaters, those who take favors without returning them. This gives rise to a suite of moralistic emotions: gratitude for the cooperator, anger at the freeloader. This view of human social life is far more tragic than the utopian vision of the noble savage. It suggests that conflict is not an aberration, but an inherent part of the human condition. So, these four sciences, cognitive science, neuroscience, behavioral genetics, and evolutionary psychology, have given us a new picture of human nature. The mind is not a blank slate, we are not noble savages, and there is no ghost in the machine. We are a product of evolution, with a complex, innate, and universal human nature. But this new picture terrifies people. Pinker devotes a large part of the book to dissecting the four great fears that this new science of human nature evokes. The first fear is the fear of inequality. If people are not blank slates, but are born with different innate abilities and temperaments, does that mean that discrimination and oppression are justified? If some groups are, on average, different from others, does that make racism or sexism rational? Pinker's answer is an emphatic no. Equality is not an empirical claim that people are interchangeable. It is a moral principle that individuals should not be judged or constrained by the average properties of their group. We condemn discrimination not because all groups are biologically identical, but because it's wrong to penalize people for things they cannot control. Our shared human nature, our universal desire for dignity and fairness, is the very foundation for our opposition to bigotry. The second fear is the fear of imperfectibility. If we are born with selfish or violent instincts, does that mean that hopes for social progress are futile? Why try to make the world a better place if people are just rotten to the core? This, Pinker argues, is based on two fallacies. The first is the naturalistic fallacy, the idea that whatever is natural is good. Biology tells us what is, not what ought to be. As Katharine Hepburn famously says in The African Queen, nature, Mr. Allnut, is what we are put in this world to rise above. The second fallacy is to think that if we have ignoble motives, we are slaves to them. But the mind is a complex system with many parts. We may have selfish or violent impulses, but we also have a moral sense, a capacity for empathy, and a frontal lobe that allows us to foresee the consequences of our actions. Social progress is not about erasing human nature, but about using some parts of our nature, like our reason and our sympathy, to overcome other parts. The third fear is the fear of determinism. If our thoughts and actions are the product of a physical brain, which is shaped by our genes and our evolution, where does that leave free will and personal responsibility? If a murderer's brain is different, can we still hold him accountable? Pinker argues that this fear confuses explanation with exculpation. To explain a behavior is not to excuse it. The purpose of holding people responsible is not some mystical idea of a soul making a free choice. It's a practical policy of deterrence. We punish people to make bad behavior less profitable for them and for anyone else who might be tempted to follow suit. A biological explanation of a criminal's motives doesn't change the fact that his brain contains a system that can respond to the threat of punishment. A scientific understanding of behavior doesn't eliminate responsibility. It helps us apply it more effectively. The fourth and final fear is the fear of nihilism. If we are just biological machines, and our genes' only goal is to replicate themselves, does that mean our lives have no higher meaning or purpose? Does it mean that love, beauty, and morality are just shams? This fear, Pinker suggests, confuses two levels of explanation. It confuses the ultimate cause of our evolution, the metaphorical selfishness of genes, with the proximate cause of our experience, the real motives in our brains. A gene's selfish strategy can be to build a brain that is genuinely unselfish. The love we feel for our children or our spouse is real. The moral sense that drives us to seek justice is real. These things are not illusions just because they have an evolutionary explanation. In fact, understanding their evolutionary roots can make them seem even more profound. As Kant wrote, two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe: the starry heavens above and the moral law within. Science is now beginning to understand the origins of that moral law within us. Having diffused these fears, Pinker then applies this new understanding of human nature to some of the hot-button issues of our time. On politics, he shows how the great divide between the left and the right is rooted in two different visions of human nature. The left has traditionally embraced a utopian vision, based on the blank slate, believing that human nature is malleable and that society can be perfected. The right has traditionally held a tragic vision, believing that humans are inherently flawed and that we must rely on time-tested traditions and institutions to keep our darker impulses in check. Pinker argues that the evidence from the sciences of human nature largely vindicates the tragic vision, but that this doesn't mean we have to be conservatives. A Darwinian left can acknowledge our limitations while still working to reduce suffering and expand the circle of our sympathy. On violence, he argues that violence is not a disease or a cultural fad. It's a strategy that, under certain circumstances, has paid off in our evolutionary history. Understanding the logic of violence, why people compete for resources, why they fear their neighbors, and why they fight for honor, is the key to reducing it. The most effective violence reduction technique ever invented, he argues, is a democratic government with a monopoly on the legitimate use of force, Hobbes's Leviathan. It removes the incentives for plunder, preemption, and reputation building that drive so much conflict. On gender, he argues that it is a mistake for feminism to chain itself to the dogma that men and women are psychologically interchangeable. The evidence for innate, average differences in talents, temperaments, and life priorities is overwhelming. Equity feminism, which demands equal rights and opportunities, is perfectly compatible with this evidence. But gender feminism, which insists on identical outcomes like 50-50 representation in all professions, is on a collision course with reality. Respecting women, he argues, means respecting their choices, even if those choices, on average, differ from men's. On children, he drives home the revolutionary implications of the three laws of behavioral genetics. The belief that parents can mold their children like clay is a myth. This realization, he argues, is ultimately liberating. It frees parents from the anxiety and guilt of trying to be perfect parenting machines. It allows them to enjoy their relationship with their children for what it is, a human relationship, rather than a project of social engineering. And finally, on the arts, Pinker argues that the decline of the elite arts and humanities in the 20th century can be traced to their denial of human nature. Modernism and postmodernism, in their disdain for beauty, pleasure, and narrative, cut themselves off from the very aesthetic instincts that make art a universal human passion. A revitalization of the arts, he suggests, will come from a new consilience with the sciences of the mind, a return to an art that speaks to the deepest parts of our shared humanity. In the end, The Blank Slate is not a pessimistic book. It's a call for intellectual honesty. It's an argument that we cannot build a better world on a foundation of comforting fictions. We must have the courage to know ourselves, to understand the intricate, flawed, and beautiful nature that makes us who we are. Because it is only by understanding that nature that we can hope to transcend its limitations and live up to our highest ideals. Commentary. Reading The Blank Slate for the first time feels a bit like having the rug pulled out from under you. It's unsettling. All these comfortable ideas, that we can be anything, that our children's futures are in our hands, that our problems are entirely society's fault, they start to wobble. But once you find your footing again, you realize you're standing on much firmer ground. That's the real power of this book. It doesn't just tear down old ideas, it gives you a new, more solid foundation for thinking about everything that matters. For me, the most powerful lesson in the Blank Slate is the liberation that comes from letting go of the myth of the perfectible human. The 20th century was ravaged by utopian ideologies, from both the left and the right, that believed they could engineer a new man. These projects always ended in tyranny and mass suffering, because they were based on a complete ignorance of the raw material they were trying to shape. They forgot, as Madison and the American founders knew, that if men were angels, no government would be necessary. Pinker reminds us that the best and most humane political systems are not those that assume the best of us, but those that are designed to withstand the worst of us. Democracy, with its checks and balances, and free markets, with their harnessing of self-interest, are brilliant social technologies built on a realistic, tragic view of human nature. They are systems designed for real humans, not for the angels we wish we were. This realism has a profound effect on a personal level as well. And here are a few simple ways you can start applying this way of thinking to your own life, right now. First, practice the art of separating is from ought. When you learn about a human tendency, say, our innate craving for status, or our bias towards our own kin, don't jump to the conclusion that this is how things should be. Recognize it for what it is, a part of our evolutionary inheritance. Your values, your morality, come from your choice to rise above some of those instincts and to cultivate others, like reason and empathy. Understanding your nature is the first step to mastering it. Second, be kinder to yourself and to your parents. If you've ever felt guilty for not living up to some perfect ideal, or if you've ever blamed your parents for every flaw in your character, this book is a powerful antidote. You are not a lump of clay. You were born with a unique temperament, a unique set of talents. Your parents didn't create you, they helped you grow. This doesn't let anyone off the hook for being cruel or neglectful, but it does free us from the crushing burden of a false theory of human development. It allows you to take ownership of your own life. Finally, cultivate a sense of awe for your own mind. The Blank Slate is, at its heart, a deeply disrespectful view of humanity. It sees us as passive, empty vessels. Pinker's vision is the opposite. He shows us that the human mind is the most complex and wonderful thing in the known universe. It is a system of wonderfully complex faculties that gives us the power of language, of reason, of art, of love. It is the source of all our triumphs and all our tragedies. That was a summary of The Blank Slate by Steven Pinker. We've explored some of the biggest ideas from this incredible book today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you make the journey yourself. The true magic of a book like this happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a single brilliant sentence connects with you in a way you never expected. This summary is just a starting point, a way for you to decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity or challenged your thinking, I truly hope you'll pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning new facts, it's an experience that can fundamentally change the way you see yourself, your society, and your place in the world. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to click that like button and, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's keep exploring the best ideas in the world, together.